Welcome to Talkin' About It, where we're doing a deep dive into the Lord of the Rings books from two very different perspectives. I'm Evelyn, and I've never read the books.
I'm Robert, and I've read the books too many times to count. Come join us on this adventure.
Hey, I'm Evelyn.
And I'm Robert.
And we're talking about it.
All right, so we are at the last chapter in book 1.
Yes.
Just so people don't get confused, Fellowship of the Ring is part of the larger story. Within the book called Fellowship of the Ring, there are actually 2 books.
Yes.
The way Tolkien originally wrote this was in 6 books, and 2 books are in each one of the published volumes.
Right. So, we're glad that you guys liked our format last episode where we did the 2 shorter chapters. We're definitely going to keep that in mind for the future. But since this is the last chapter of book 1, we're only going to do the 1. But we are going to do a wrap-up of our thoughts and everything from the entire book 1 once we're done with this.
Yes.
So, the chapter is called Flight to the Ford.
To the Ford, not to the Chevy, not to the Dodge, but to the Ford.
Yes. And we need to adjust predictions.
Yes, so what were your predictions? I forget.
So my predictions were that Ford was like a fjord in Scandinavia, where I predicted they were going to meet high cliffs with deep water and such. That's just where my mind went, knowing that Tolkien is a Norse nerd. That's just where my mind went, is that it would be like a fjord. My other prediction was that Strider burned at least one ring wraith, because at the end it was kind of a cliffhanger where he came at them with the fire. And then my final prediction, because I honestly didn't have a real one, was there would be another song.
That there would be another song. You know, that's not a fair prediction anymore.
Okay, so the reason that I was able to get away with it is because I made the bold prediction halfway through the other episode with the other chapter, where I said that they were not going to meet Dumbledore. They were not going to meet Gandalf.
They are not going to meet Dumbledore.
You
are correct on that.
Where they aren't going to meet Gandalf until they get to Rivendell. So I don't know how many chapters it's going to take to get to Rivendell, but I predicted that they will not see him again until they get to Rivendell.
Okay, dope.
That being said, let's see how many times it takes for me to say Gryffindor, because I kept thinking Gryffindor for something else that comes on later in this book.
Okay. All right. So, the last book ended on a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
A very anxious cliffhanger.
A very anxious cliffhanger. So, what we immediately find out in the beginning of this book is that Frodo has been stabbed.
Yes.
And he's been stabbed with what is called a Morgul knife.
Mm-hmm.
Those knives are designed for the tip to break off in them, in the person that they stab.
Oh.
And that it's a dark knife.
Yes.
So the knife...
They use the word cursed.
Yes. So that small point that breaks off is supposed to weaken the person and eventually work its way to the heart. Okay? So that's why throughout this chapter we see Frodo getting sicker and sicker.
Right, and that's something we'll get to, but even Sam talks to Strider about that, very concerned later on.
Right. Now, Strider immediately promises to do what he can for Frodo, and admits that Frodo is made of stronger stuff than he first thought.
Yes.
So while Frodo was out, Strider left to make sure that the Black Riders left the area.
Yes.
And it's after he returns that he realizes that Frodo has been stabbed with this Morgul knife. Now, a Morgul knife is designed to break off inside. It's scored near the tip, and so it's designed to break off inside a person. And since it's made of things from Mordor, it just, makes the soul sick.
Gotcha.
And so that's why he is so sick during this time. And plus, that little piece also makes its way back all the way to the heart to eventually kill the person. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say this now because I don't want to forget it later on. Also, that little piece allows the Witch King to keep an eye on where he's at.
Oh, okay.
So
that's good to know. Or scary to know, I guess.
Yeah. Now, and then Strider promises to do what he can for Frodo.
Right. He's very concerned.
Right. But he also says that Frodo is made of much stronger stuff than he first thought.
Yes.
And also during this time, Strider wonders why only 5 of the riders were there. And he fears they will come again, all of them, on the next night.
Yes.
So he's really ready to hit the road.
Right.
Now, going back to this part about saying that Frodo is stronger. Now, going back to this part saying Frodo is made of stronger stuff than he thought, I think I believe he says this because he sees that Frodo is resisting the power of the wound. Maybe even much better so than even he could.
Yes, he does mention that he's very surprised that he knew that Frodo was resilient from what he was told about him, but even this is more resilient than he could have anticipated.
Right. So it's interesting that we've already got at this point mention of Frodo's will and strength.
Now that, to me, what my mind immediately went to was when Gandalf was talking about how the hobbits are much more resilient to the ring, that they talked about early on at the beginning of the book, where Gandalf was very surprised that Bilbo was able to hold off for so long, that the community itself was not as affected as communities around the ring usually are.
Right. Yeah.
And that's exactly where my mind went.
Yeah. And so...
that maybe hobbits are more resilient than other people give them credit for in general.
Right, exactly. Now, also when Strider returns, he finds that black cloak on the ground, and it apparently has a cut in it. So that means Frodo did probably strike the rider, but didn't do much to him.
Right.
If anything at all.
Yeah.
And he also says that instead of the strike, maybe even calling out for the names of those 2
elves,
heavenly beings, whatever you want to call them, might have done more damage than the strike at all.
Right, yeah. Which I thought was really interesting.
Strider also finds the remains of the knife that stabbed him.
Yes, and it basically disintegrates.
Right, that's so cool that the blade just disappears like smoke.
Right.
Okay. Now, what's kind of cool is that in an interview many years later, for some reason Tolkien talked about this. And he mentions that he might have been thinking about Beowulf when he wrote it. Because the sword that kills Grendel's mother and cuts off Grendel's hair just melts in place afterwards as well.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't turn to smoke, but it does melt.
And that is a word that is used here, is that it looked melted before it turned to smoke.
Right. And so now Strider is really worried about the nature of Frodo's wound.
Yes. He uses some healing magic and herbs, but he says that there's very few people who can completely treat it, and they got to get to Rivendell, like, now.
Right. Well, also, he takes off again to find the leaves
Right.
of this. And he says it doesn't grow around hill country, so he had to go very far.
Yes.
And come back. And so we kind of get another hint of his nickname, Strider. Mm-hmm. Because he's able to cover these long distances pretty quickly.
Right.
And he found them because he smelt them. All right. Now, pause for a minute. And it comes from a plant that he calls Ectolus. And he has knowledge of the healing power. And he says this knowledge has been lost to all except the rangers. Because most other people see it as a useless reed.
Oh.
Because others see it as a useless weed.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And even when he puts it in the cup of hot water, the hobbits that don't drink it are even calmed a little bit by the smell.
Oh, I didn't notice that, but okay.
Now, here's another interesting thing. So here's another interesting thing. Tolkien takes the words, damn it. Okay. And here's another interesting thing. Tolkien takes words from Anglo-Saxon and Old French to come up with the name of this leaf.
Okay.
The Anglo-Saxon word, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, means noble. And the Old French word foil means leaf. We find out later on, spoiler alert, that this is called King's Foil. Right? What is also interesting is that in the Earth Sea books by Ursula Le Guin, King's Foil is an herb. So I think that's kind of a cool callback.
Okay.
You know. And even with the help of this drink made from this leaf, Frodo cannot lift his arm. He can't use his hand.
Right, and he is extremely worried about what that means for the rest of their journey.
And he's also in a great deal of pain.
Yes.
He's weak between the pain and being weakened. He can't walk. So they clear all the stuff off the pony, divide it amongst themselves, and put Frodo on the pony.
Now, just talking about the pony again, they do a callback. So just speaking of the pony, several times in this chapter, they mention the pony again and the man who sold it, and how even though this was such a treacherous journey and how much the pony had to carry, it was doing fathoms better than it was before.
Yeah.
And that just shows you like how poorly it was treated, and it makes me upset.
Yeah, I found it interesting too that we keep getting the hints on the pony is looking better, the pony's doing better.
Right.
So I think that's neat. I actually have something a little bit later on I want to talk about as well.
Sure.
So Strider has decided that he's going to do what he can to shorten the journey.
Yes.
So instead of staying on the road, which winds all between the hills and everything, he's going to kind of make a straight shot. Also, by staying off the road, less chance of running into the riders.
Right.
So he strives to shorten the journey because some will win and some will lose. Some are born to sing the blues. Oh, the movie never ends. It goes on and on and on and on.
I'm so angry right now. You did not need to add another song to this book.
That was much slow, but that song was much shorter than the other one in the book. This was
if there is any book that needs more songs, it is not this one.
This was a compromise. I just thought, actually though, this song hit me in the head like several times reading this for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, that's a nice little sidebar. Let's go off.
Back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Oh, wait, I'm not done. Why does Frodo cross the road?
Why?
The chicken is his guide and he was bound to it.
I don't get it. I don't.
All right.
If you guys get it, please let me know. Thanks.
Yeah, and if you guys have better jokes, please let us know.
Please.
Apparently, I don't even get a pass for a dad's joke on Father's Day.
Yesterday was Father's Day.
Yeah, but I didn't get any passes yesterday either, though, so...
Yes, you did. I just ignored you instead of making fun of you.
So as they cross the road, they look, they don't see anything, but they hear voices. They hear one cold voice calling out and a cold voice answering.
Yes.
Now, I like the image of a cold voice.
Okay.
Because that's part of the pain that Frodo's having.
Mm-hmm.
He's got this cold feeling from this wound.
Yes.
And so it kind of calls back to who gave him the wound and why these cold voices calling back and forth to each other even harms him a little bit. Whereas everyone hears it and is a little dreadful. This voice harms him a little bit just hearing it.
Okay.
And thankfully, we are quickly set 4 days in advance because nothing much has changed. It took them 6 days to reach the top of a slope where they could see far, far ahead.
Yes, it talks about how it was a 10-day journey. And during this time, there was really no sign of the enemy, and Strider was highly concerned. Strider was convinced that they were going to make another move, and so the fact that they haven't makes him more anxious.
Yeah, it makes him a little paranoid.
Yeah.
But when they're on this slope, all they see ahead of them is another woods.
Yes. And this time it's even more treacherous.
Right. But they do get through it.
And there's bad weather.
But they do get through it, and they get back on the road. Since when they come to the river, the only way to get across so they get back on the road, and one reason why they get back on the road is the only way to cross this river is over the quote-unquote last bridge. Okay. And so it's capitalized like a proper noun. The last bridge.
Yes.
So I found that interesting. We don't get any more hints about it, really. But it's just, I just found it interesting that it's got a name in its place. And they also find themselves very fortunate that the last bridge is not being held against them.
Yes.
Because apparently they thought that might happen.
Right.
And when they get to the bridge, they don't see any black figures at all. They don't have any indications that they're even around.
Mm-hmm.
But they find out. But Strider finds what he considers to be a good sign.
Okay.
He finds that little pale green elf stone.
Yes.
And he takes it back to show them even. And this stone he brought back for the hobbits to see, and so he could also tell them, I think this is a good sign.
Right.
Trying to keep what little bit of hope they have up.
Right. Because that's something that he does say. Because Sam is constantly worried about Frodo in this chapter. And at one point, Strider says, but don't give up hope, Sam.
Right. Now, some interesting background here as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an interesting inconsistency here between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So here in The Lord of the Rings, it takes Strider, who's supposed to know this area really well, 6 days to get from here to the bridge. But it only took Bilbo and the dwarves an hour to go the same amount of mileage.
Oh.
Or, not mileage, but where it only took the dwarves and Bilbo an hour to get from point A to point B. He tries to edit this a little bit. He tries to go back and edit The Hobbit to include the last bridge and fix some of the inconsistencies. But this timing is still there.
Yeah. I didn't realize that at all. But we know the connection to The Hobbit because...
Well, we're not there yet.
Oh.
So, and as soon as they cross the bridge, they go back into the dark woods again.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, I mean... So they cross the bridge and go back into the dark woods again. And as you mentioned, it does sound familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And even Frodo, as bad as he feels, recognizes where they're at from Bilbo's tale.
Okay.
Okay? He wonders if they will pass, quote unquote, the spot. So that's why he knows where it's at, because from the map that Bilbo has drawn and from the written story and everything.
Right.
And what's interesting here as well is Pippin is the stand-in for us, the readers.
Mm-hmm.
Because he asked the question, if no one lives in this land, how much... So Pippin asked, if no one lives in this land, how do you know so much about it? Because Strider says, no one lives here, no one's lived here for a long time. But he answers that the heirs of his family do not forget, and also that Rivendell remembers.
Right. And that's when he talks a little bit about Rivendell.
Right. He's asked if he's ever been in Rivendell, and yes, he's been there, and his heart is there.
Right. I wrote that down too. It's like the exact quote is, "There my heart is."
Right. So that gives us a hint that there is someone there whom he loves, or at least is very dear to him.
Right.
And it also makes us aware of who he is, and that there is something very important he must do besides being able to just hang out in Rivendell with this very dear person. And just when somebody could have said, can this get any worse? It rains.
Yep.
It rains so hard for 2 days they can't even start a fire. If it rains so hard a ranger can't start a fire,
That's a lot of rain.
that's a lot of rain, man.
Yeah, that's a lot of rain.
Frodo is still restless and in pain. And then they realize they've traveled too far and need to double back to the ford. Now, a ford, for those of you who don't know,
Like me.
A ford is a shallow place. A ford is a shallow place in a river that you can cross. Not only is it shallow, it's also sturdy, or at least semi-sturdy, where you or horses or even a wagon can get across.
Gotcha.
As in fording the river.
I've never heard that expression.
You are such a millennial. So they decide that they need to go back to find the ford.
Okay.
They decide to attempt another climb. And this is too much for Frodo, since he's been touched by an evil weapon.
Right, because it's so steep he has to get off the pony.
Right. But what's really interesting is here, Sam is told, don't give up hope.
Right.
And which is really interesting because that's almost a foretelling too. Because never again do we see Sam giving up hope.
Okay. Okay.
Frodo also dreams of dark wings.
Yes.
And that gives us a foretelling as well. They have to get back on the road. And here we get told something about the pony again. The pony is smart enough to pick a path and spare the rider from its bumps and jolts. The pony is smart enough to pick a path and spare the rider from bumps and jolts.
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about the pony here a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. So, here's a question to ponder. Was it just good luck that this pony was there? That this was a very able pony just being mistreated?
Mm-hmm.
Was it predestined that this pony would be found by them?
Mm-hmm.
Or does this pony become more... Or does this pony become more as far as its character and its abilities due to some unseen force? Due to some unseen force, which makes him so.
Okay. The way that I've kind of been seeing it is it's like there is potential for this animal, and because he's being treated properly, his potential is coming out.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards maybe some unseen force is working here too.
Mm-hmm.
So every other mount that the good guys have
Mm-hmm.
are something special.
Okay.
And so maybe in the interweavings of everything here, the pony, just by being exposed to this journey, has somehow become more than it was.
Okay. All right. I dig it.
So they're on this path, and they recognize that this path was made at one time with many feet and strong arms.
Yes.
Okay? They find a door in a stony wall. A door in a stony wall. To me, that just seems weird. I mean,
it seems like one of those, like, evil lair passages that you would find in James Bond.
Right. Well, so what's his name? What's the bad guy's name in the Smurfs?
Oh, Gargamel?
Yeah, it's kind of reminds me of...
Yeah, a little bit of Gargamel.
Yeah,
Okay.
a little bit of Gargamel. But we find out that it is a troll hole.
Yes.
And dun, 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 they see the 3 large trolls from Bilbo's earlier journey.
Well, not only that, Pippin sees them first and comes to alert them all. Strider, being Strider, is like, all right, I'm going to take care of this. And, like, immediately goes to attack. And then it's and then it's revealed that they are made of stone in the bright sunlight. And he's like, Pippin, what the heck, man?
Yeah, I sawed my britches. He doesn't say that, but you can imagine. But we're so happy that we didn't have to fight trolls again. Somebody sing a song.
No, it's... Seeing the trolls, they immediately remember Bilbo's story. And by...
No, song is before Bilbo's story.
No, it's not. Bilbo's story is first.
You're correct. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So seeing the trolls, they immediately recognize it as the story from Bilbo. And Frodo suddenly gets much more... What's the opposite of disheartened?
Heartened.
Heartened. That's the word I'm looking for. He gets much more heartened because he remembers that this is the first real triumph of Bilbo's journey, and it gives all the hobbits, because they're all related and they've all heard Bilbo's tell the tales so many times, that it immediately raises their spirits.
Right.
So much so that Sam starts to sing a song.
Right. But one of the things I found interesting was Pippin, until this moment, was never sure that the story was true.
Right.
And Frodo keeps calling it, you forget your family history. So he's including Sam, Pippin, and Merry,
right,
as quote unquote family.
Exactly.
So we need a song.
And so Sam is able to sing this song, and afterwards they're like, we've never heard this before. This is incredible. And he's like, well, I just kind of made it up.
Yep.
And Frodo says that it's amazing how far Sam has come and how he's a bard now. And he quotes, he'll end up becoming a wizard or a warrior. But Sam replies, I hope not. I don't want to be either. And I think that really speaks a lot to his character.
Right. Now, some behind the scenes stuff.
Okay.
When this song was originally written, it was supposed to be the song in the Prancing Pony.
Oh, okay.
And then he wrote something else, and he already had it, so he wanted to put it somewhere.
Okay.
And also, some of the one line of the words in it is, without axing leave, should go making fire. Now, just like our family, instead of say asking, we say axing.
Okay.
All right? So we're not the only ones that say that. Okay? And Frodo is asked, does he think there's still gold buried underneath that rock that they found?
Right.
Which is marked, and they're assuming that's the rock that they buried everything
under. Yeah.
Yeah. And Frodo says that Bilbo had told him he actually never kept none of the treasure, because he felt since it was stolen, it wasn't his to have. So he gave it away over the years.
Gotcha. Right.
And then we hear hoofs, which frightens him a little bit.
But it's different this time.
It's different. And there's bells. There's like tinkling of bells.
Right.
And Strider goes, huh! Like, I think I know what that is. And
right.
Goes running down the road, probably leaving the hobbits there with their mouths open, going, where he going?
Exactly.
Without us. But it's Glorfindel from Elrond's house.
Which I immediately read as Gryffindor when I first read it.
Yeah, okay. And at one point, Glorfindel tells them that he's chased the riders away. But now all 5 of them are together behind them.
Right.
Frodo gets pained. He gets more pained.
Right. And it's mentioned that it would not be a surprise if all 9 were soon to be together.
Right. And also, Glorfindel noticed that on this dagger, that part of it is broke off inside Frodo, has some writing on it.
Yes, some dark writing, and he tells Strider, hold on to this so we can get to Rivendell so someone can figure out what it is.
Right. And they ask him about Gandalf. And he said when he left, Gandalf still was not at Rivendell.
Right.
So they put Frodo on Glorfindel's horse, and they move all night.
Yes.
And before they take off, though, he shares a drink and some short rations with them.
Yes.
Which it's mentioned that this does more good for them than a good breakfast back at the Shire.
Right.
So there must be some magical qualities here. Now, again, some backstory.
Okay.
Glorfindel is an elf with a very old soul. There's a tale from some of other Tolkien's work called The Fall of Glorfindel, where his body died, but his spirit was sent to the halls of Mandos to be judged. And he was judged that he had sacrificed his life. So his soul remains in the halls of waiting until So his soul remained in the halls of waiting until it was granted release. And then Valdor restores him to life.
Okay.
Putting back together his spiritual power and his body. And also his spiritual power is also enhanced due to this self-sacrifice.
Okay.
So when he returns to Middle-earth, his power has become greater.
Okay.
And Glorfindel feels in his heart that the riders could catch them at the ford.
Okay.
In which we find out he was correct.
Yes. Because as soon as they get there, stuff goes down.
Yeah. And then while Frodo tries to wait, Glorfindel tells the horse to go. That Frodo was on. Go.
Yes.
And then the race is on. We actually have some real action again.
Yes.
We've had a lot of
slow-moving traveling. Which I'll admit got a little boring for me.
Right. But part of that is to give us an idea of...
I'm starting to realize why. It's just still...
Yeah. So part of it is to tell us how... Part of it is to give us a sense of this fearful time. And how long this fearful time is taking.
True.
So like I said, so the race is on. Now Frodo doesn't put his ring on, but he sees all 9 riders.
Yes.
Completely different. They're not wearing black robes. To him now, he sees them in white and gray robes.
Yes.
And this is because he's got that piece of the knife in him.
Okay.
Frodo was at a threshold of becoming a wraith himself. And because of that wound, the riders know exactly who he is. And they can see him more clearly than any other thing. Because that's within him.
Okay. And as they're chasing him, Frodo lets out this plea. Just please leave me alone. Go back to Mordor.
Yeah.
Stop. And they just laugh at him.
Right. He yells, go back to Mordor. Not only do they laugh at him, goes, oh, we'll go back to Mordor and we'll bring you with us.
Right.
And then he is kind of struck dumb. He's just, something is just keeping him from moving, keeping him from talking.
Right.
And at that point, his sword breaks and falls out of his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And that may very well be because he actually did hit the Witch King.
Mm-hmm.
And that there might be some type of connection between this weapon and the Witch King now.
Okay.
And so the Witch King is able to cause it just to fall apart.
Okay.
And while Frodo is sitting there on the horse, not being able to talk, not being able to move, the water is getting loud.
Yes.
It's getting loud. It's moving faster. Frodo says it looks like white flames. And he also talks about what looks like white riders upon white horses coming down within the flood.
Yes.
Now, 3 of the Black Riders were already in the water.
Mm-hmm.
So they get swept away.
Right.
And the other horses are filled with such madness that they leap into the river with their riders and they are swept away as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then Frodo faints and scene.
Yes.
So I know I talked a lot there. Do you have anything else that I didn't mention that you thought was interesting?
No.
Or a different take on something that I saw?
No. That was pretty much exactly what I was looking at, what I was thinking. The stuff that I interjected on, exactly that.
Okay. So I know we wanted to do a little bit of a wrap-up.
Right. I'm not going to make predictions for this one because it is the end of book 1.
Right.
And I do know from my limited movie knowledge that he basically wakes up in Rivendell. I don't know if that's exactly what happens, but because the book is obviously longer, but that would be my only prediction, is that he wakes up in Rivendell based on movie. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do kind of a wrap up of book 1, kind of stuff we thought, stuff that stood out to us, what we think about it.
Right. So my first question is, now that you've read that first book, those first chapters, has your imagination, the feelings or predictions that you thought this first part of the book would be, has it changed from when you first started reading?
I think so. It's now that I'm looking at it through a more academic lens, I guess, and really looking at every little thing, it's not quite as boring as when I initially thought it was going to be, because I never made it to Tom Bombadil the few times that I tried to read it beforehand.
Okay.
And after reading Tom Bombadil especially, that really, it lightened the mood, it gave it more pizzazz, and it's like, oh, there's more to it than just this. And I think part of it was I was just kind of just reading it kind of quickly, not really thinking about it too hard. But now that I'm actually analyzing it and looking at it, it's not quite as boring as I initially thought.
Okay. And is the content any different than what you thought it might be?
It's a lot more history than I thought it was going to be. I was always kind of under the impression that other material and supplementary material had the history in the background, which we do touch on a little bit. but a lot of the history and such we are getting in this book, and I'm actually enjoying that background.
Okay.
Like, it gives more context to what's going on. It kind of breaks up this story, which is a little bit bland in some parts, where they're just kind of traveling from one road to the next, just like we were talking about in this chapter, where it was like 10 whole days of just travel. So it was a nice way to kind of break up some stuff and have that.
Okay. That sounds good. Now, I know from looking at your copy of the book, you got a lot of bookmarks.
Yes.
A lot of tabs. So, you want to talk about some of those?
I mean, more of when I was going through it, I highlighted stuff that I thought was important, some stuff I noticed, and a lot of quotes. I noticed I do a lot of quotes. But I also highlighted some history, some lighter parts. A lot of it is characterization. So some quotes about Frodo and his anxiety. Some parts about Pippin being a little on the naive side, but still enthusiastic. And then, because I know Sam's your favorite character, I've been paying very close attention to Sam and noticing a lot of his character traits. So that's what I've realized going through the book, is that I've highlighted a lot of character stuff versus plot stuff, which I guess just shows what I enjoy. I like the character development. I mean, the plot's interesting too, but I guess that's just what I've been focusing more on.
Right. And there is a lot. I forgot how much foretelling there is.
Yes, there's a lot of foretelling.
And there's quite a bit of foretelling I didn't talk about, because I think if I started talking about it in this context,
too much spoilers,
it would be we'd be in the spoiler territory for you and anyone else who hasn't read the book and is following along.
Okay.
But there's a lot there that I had forgot.
Right. We've mentioned a few things. And it's kind of been interesting, us going through it, because we've had different takes on such. Just thinking about the last chapter, last episode, talking about the sickle in the sky, where just two different perspectives taking different things away, and that's the entire point of this podcast.
Right.
So that's kind of been interesting.
Yes. And it's also interesting to think about the fact that Gandalf hasn't been here.
Yes. That's been making me very anxious.
And but remember, there's parts of The Hobbit that he's not there as well.
Right, but in my opinion, The Hobbit was more of a Gandalf really cares about these dwarf guys and that they deserve to get their home back, versus this is the fate of the entire world. It kind of feels a little bit higher stakes here.
Okay.
And especially in earlier chapters where Gandalf's like, I don't want to leave Frodo alone, and he's leaving him alone. Even though he's leaving with people he trusts, there's obviously more at stake here if he is not around Frodo.
Right.
And that's something I'm definitely taking away. I mean, I've always kind of took this away from Lord of the Rings versus The Hobbit. The stakes are definitely elevated.
Right. And then one of the interesting things about Gandalf not showing up back in the Shire, it delays them taking off.
Right, because
to a point
keep wanting to wait for him.
Right, they keep wanting to wait for him. And if they had taken off when they initially wanted to,
mm-hmm.
what would have been different about getting to Rivendell? I mean, would
True.
the riders still be out looking for him?
Maybe they would have had less information about them. But then again, if they always would have gotten to Bree, and maybe the accident, I don't really consider it more of an accident. I consider that the ring being a messy little thing. Trying to stay clean in this podcast is hard sometimes. But yeah, the ring is very much sentient, is something else I've taken away from this. And there are some parts where it's like, no, I feel like this always would have happened. And maybe if they had left sooner, maybe Strider would have not been in Bree at the same time as them.
Correct.
And that could have ended very badly. Because I feel like the accident would have always happened with the ring basically putting itself on Frodo's hand.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting that he keeps getting this feeling to put the ring on.
Right.
And sometimes, like in the Prancing Pony, it just happens.
Right.
Or where he is so scared, he feels like if he puts on the ring, he can at least hide.
Yes.
But it has the opposite effect.
Right. Which, of course, there's no way we could have known this would happen. But then again, learning more about the ring, and again, going back to Tom Bombadil, where the ring has, like, no effect on him whatsoever. That was such a shock to me.
Tom is so at one with the world that the ring does not pose any longing, any greed, any hate, or any love.
He's such a neutral character.
Right. Whereas Gondal says, don't let me touch that.
Right.
Oh, can you imagine what would happen if I had that ring?
Right. If Gandalf got corrupted with the power he has, it's insane.
Right. Spoiler alert. But I find this whole first book very interesting. It gives us a really good taste of how Tolkien is a storyteller and how he uses words. Because it's almost a primer so we can be able to read the rest of the books.
Okay. So yeah, like I said, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to.
Okay.
And a lot more than I have before. So,
as I mentioned, I keep saying so too, but at least I don't go some, like, some, we have now read 1/6 of the material.
Okay.
Maybe not by length, but by design.
Right.
And so we wonder what you think about these first chapters. If you have any ideas, send us an email. You can Twitter us.
Twitter us.
Twitter us. Twitter us.
Tweet at us.
Twitter us. Tweet at us.
Yes. Facebook, join our Patreon, our Discord, all that fun stuff.
All that fun stuff. So because we want you to get involved as well.
Absolutely.
We want this to be a little bit of come and go between us.
Right. We want to hear your thoughts, your comments. We've been hearing a lot of great feedback, which we've implemented already, which seems to be making people happy. But we want to hear more. Talk to us. Let's have some conversations. Let's hear what your thoughts on these chapters are and everything.
Okay. I also want to throw out a challenge.
Okay.
For our next episode, I would like for at least one of our listeners to keep track of our so, and likes. Just so we can hear back from that person and realize how bad we really are with that.
I mean, I know we're bad. At least, especially me. I'm so bad at it. I try to edit it out a little bit, but it's hard.
All right. So, I think we're done with this episode.
I think so.
So,
and it's a good length.
That
was a long chapter, though.
Yes, it has been.
It was a long chapter.
What a long, strange trip it's been.
So far.
I've been Robert.
And I've been Evelyn.
And you've been listening to Token About It.
See you next time.
Thank you so much for listening. I have been Robert.
And I have been Evelyn.
Podcasters are Robert and Evelyn Lewis.
Edited by Evelyn Lewis.
Produced by Robert Lewis, Evelyn Lewis, Regina, and Comic Canary.
Music provided by Ben Sound. Link in the description.
Support us on Patreon at Token About It Podcast.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Tolkien About It.
And Twitter at Token Pod.
Thank you all again for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.